咚，
梆锵锵锵，锣拨呀，这大家好，这里是合成少数派，我是梦琪。那么今天呢，这个节目大家看到了，不是我一个人，旁边这位呢，玉克是一位非常擅长中国传统乐器古筝的美国人，玩合成器也特棒啊。然后玉克跟大家打个招呼吧。
大家好，我叫玉克 I'm your friendly neighborhood American Guzhengist, visiting Beijing from Guiyang, China, and very happy to be in the presence of Mr. Meng Qi.You're
welcome. Thank you. I'm honored. 最早呢，是因为玉克做了一期关于中国早期合成器电子琴考古的一个视频啊，介绍野马电子琴是吧？野马电子琴，他做的 documentary。然后呢，有小伙伴们爱合成少数派说提到我了，然后我就过去看了一眼，所以然后就认识了。这个纪录片呢，确实非常好，他还提到了田进勤老师啊，就是整个把中国的这个早期合成器电子琴的这个发展历史进行了一番探索啊。特别想问一下玉克啊，有一个什么样的这个契机，一个原因去拍这样一个纪录片
You know, it really started with I wanted some piece of gear that was very, very cheap that I could learn some electronic DIY soldering, and I just wanted something I could mess around with, maybe circuit bend, and I just typed in 电子琴 on Xianyu, and that little Yema was the first one to come up. It was very, very up there. I wanted something with battery because, you know, when you mess around with circuit...
Yeah, be safe.
Be safe, yeah. Right. So I found this old... It was 45 Kwai. It used a bunch of those big D batteries. I figured, well, it's quite old, so that means the circuitry will be quite big. All the components will be very big.
And it's very crucial that it's analog, because with digital it's hard to bend.
Exactly. Because it's analog, I figured, like, well, it won't be hard to just kind of send electricity from one place to the next and see what happens. And it's big parts, and also it's old and cheap. It's not rare. It's not something I would be, you know...
Cautious with.
Right, exactly. But then I started to, like, I got it, and I'm looking at this thing and thinking, like, this is so interesting, because this kind of, like, first of all, the sound was crazy. Okay. It's got a speaker, like, this big on the inside of it. So when you play a note, the whole thing just, like, vibrates. It's so thick sound.
Physical.
Which, like... You know, maybe it was too loud or kind of ugly sound back in the day, but now everyone wants these synths with a really strong sound. So I'm playing one note, I'm like, this is crazy. This is a really intense sound.
Yeah.
So it started because I wanted something kind of cheap and easy to mess with, but then it really put me on this history of like, well, where did this thing come from? How long have we had synths in China?
Got you curious.
Yeah.
Cool. So, Yuka, how did you got into the Chinese traditional instrument, Guzheng?
Well, when I was in America, I used to be a jazz trombonist, changhao, right?
Okay.
And a little bit of piano, and then I started to play ukulele when I was in high school, which I took really seriously. And I had tried guitar, I tried bass, and I could never really do it. But then the ukulele was so easy. I'm like, oh, if this instrument is easy, I wonder what other instruments I could learn. And then in America, I learned dulcimer, I learned banjo, I learned all these different American folk instruments.
Okay.
Because they're all kind of, you know, just a couple of strings, easier than guitar. And then I studied abroad at NYU Shanghai back in 2015. Yeah. And I figured, well, while I'm there, I want to learn an instrument from China.
Okay.
And my first pick was pipa.
Okay.
Because I figured pipa and ukulele...
Yes, looks a little bit later.
Similar,
yeah.
I didn't know about the Zhongruan back then. That would have been a better choice, but I didn't know. And I get to the college, the new Shanghai NYU Shanghai, and they said, well, we have this program where you can learn an instrument, but we only have 笛子、二胡 and guzheng.
Okay.
So no 没有 pipa. So I was like, okay, I will learn the guzheng.
Okay, that's how it started?
And then they put one in front of me, and it was a really, really, really pretty sound, but my teacher was very strict and very, like, traditional Chinese.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do it. But then I didn't like the class. I couldn't really wrap my head around it. But then one day I was practicing. I decided to sit on the other side of the instrument.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, it was very easy because I'm left-handed.
Okay.
So all of a sudden, playing the guzheng felt very natural. So I stopped going to class, I taught myself, and it's been about 6 years now.
You also played Xiao and Zhongruan, as you said, right?
Yes. Let's see, it's Xiao, 布鲁斯, 一点点的声，一点点的古琴。
Okay.
Xiao and Zhongruan, daran.
That's quite a lot, right?
So, it's fun.
Yeah, so lately I've noticed that you have a very new video, so you posted, which focused on the difference between a traditional acoustic Guzheng and the electronic one, and that interested me a lot.
Oh, great.
Yeah, because that's the main topic we're going to talk about today, which is the electrification of acoustic instrument.
Great.
Not just traditional Chinese instrument, but all the acoustic instruments. So from your perspective, from a musician's perspective, do you like electronic one better or the acoustic one?
Well, I think they both serve very different purposes, and I think that they can absolutely coexist.
Of course, but your preference.
My preference. Well, to be honest, this is like my dream instrument. When I first saw an electric guzheng, I just thought like it's everything I love about the guzheng, and I'll go into why I like it. But my preference is the electronic one.
Yeah, sure. Go into why.
Well, I think there's two schools of thought.
Yeah.
When it comes to electronic versions of acoustic instruments, particularly Chinese ones, there's kind of the objective reasons, the tactile reasons why it's more helpful when you would choose an electric one over an acoustic one.
Yep.
And then there's the subjective, like the cultural development and what it means to have an electronic instrument. But let me talk about the objective reason, right? Like the tactile benefits of an electronic instrument, like an electronic guzheng or guqin or whatnot. Primarily, as a touring musician, as a musician who plays in live houses or in different cities, volume.
Okay.
Right? Volume and the lack of the audio feedback. 中文怎么说那个
消降回授啊
Right.
Yeah.
So when you play at a big venue, every guzheng player has had this issue. And singers, everyone with a microphone, you're going to have audio pickup. So you're kind of limited, especially if you want to add reverb or distortion or any kind of
anything
effect.
that extends the sound.
Exactly. Eventually you can only get so loud. Yep. This weekend I played a gig in a big open field and there were mountains in the background.
Yep.
And there was no hesitation to play this as loudly as I wanted to.
Yeah.
Right? Just being able to hear it echo and reverb off the mountains and stuff, it was amazing. So the first reason to have an electronic version is just you don't have to worry about volume and, The other thing is that when it comes to transporting, right, guzhengs and a lot of these instruments are quite sensitive. This one's made out of carbon fiber. This one you can just bring around. I never hesitate to bring this out. Okay. If you have like a very big guzheng, very nice and expensive, you have to be very wary, and you would never take it outside. You'd never take it to like a cheap live house.
It's much more fragile.
Right. So with an electronic one, I find that they're quite a bit more easy to transport. It's lighter. I think there's just something about not hesitating to bring your instrument with you.
Yep.
A guzheng is a big commitment to bring somewhere, even to get into the car. So, and same with the flutes and the, other electronic instruments. It's nice just to not have to carry a mic stand and all that. So,
much better companion.
Exactly. And then lastly, I like to customize my own tone. And I'm going to go into this in the subjective reason too. I think having an electronic instrument allows you to build your own tone.
Okay.
You're no longer limited by the sound of a traditional guzheng. Now, it is a beautiful sound, and a traditional guzheng sounds inherently better than an electronic one. Nothing beats the sound of a beautiful piece of wood. I would never argue that an electronic one sounds better than an acoustic one. But if you want to play rock and roll, and you want to distort your instrument, you can't do that on an acoustic guzheng. Like, you can't distort these acoustic instruments. It just doesn't sound good.
It doesn't feel well.
It doesn't feel well, and you have to worry about the feedback, and it's just, if you want to do distortion, you need an electronic one. If you want to make, like, ambient music, you want to add reverb and shimmer and stuff, having that clean tone is so great. So the third reason I would consider an electric instrument over an acoustic one is the ability to manipulate your tone. Now, this kind of goes into the subjective. What good is an electronic version of a traditional Chinese instrument? Why would we do this? And to me, I think it's all about the concept of like innovation, about moving forward, and about stimulating the growth of this very interesting world that is traditional Chinese instruments. When I first saw this thing, it was at the Music China Expo, right? And it's a Guzheng factory called Jinyun, which is a very big one. They're in Yangzhou, and they're quite established and old. But they made this, and it obviously catches people's attention because it's very in a sea of wooden Guzhengs, you just have this small, sleek black carbon fiber. So on one hand, it's a little like attention grabbing, but there isn't much development in the world of traditional instruments, right? Because these instruments are thousands of years old. That guqin is 7,000 years of history, right?
Yeah.
So there's not much that companies can do to change and innovate.
Yeah.
And I was told by them, their competition, the other companies, are not happy about this. There are some people who think an electric version of an acoustic instrument like this is wrong. Some people believe that this is a step in the wrong direction. They think it's some kind of corruption, or they think it's just not. They think it's disrespectful to the original design of a guzheng. And I think, again, these instruments can coexist. I think that there's a time and a place for an electronic.
Yeah, I can quite understand that because back in the days when electronic guitars first born, there must be like a cultural resistance against that, because that is like a betrayal of the acoustic.
And the same thing with synthesizers too. When synthesizers came out and people started to make electronic music, people thought that was like, that's not right, you can't do that. You don't have the human.
Yeah, there's no soul, is there?
There's no soul, right? Because it was a new development, and as a result. So, I'm not trying to say that this is like the Les Paul of the guzheng, I think that the concept of electrifying these instruments has many, many years to go. Yep. But I just think that there's such a statement in an instrument like this, and I just think that there's so many people out there, so many young Chinese who learned guzheng to get into the gaokao, or for whatever reason, and when they get older, they want to kind of get more into art, they want to express themselves, they want to try something new. So for an open mind, I think that these kind of things might be one potential part of the future of music in China. I think not this year, maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, there's going to be some kid who's in high school now playing guzheng, and they're going to create China's, Sino-futurist concept album using stuff like this. There already are. There's a few bands who are making some interesting things like this, but I just think that this kind of thing is going to be bigger and bigger as the Chinese culture seeks to grow and develop and change.
Bring more colors into the palette of the musicians.
Absolutely.
Right?
So I just think it takes a lot. It's going to take a long time, and more people are going to try it, but eventually it's going to get there. I'm so excited to be a part of it and to see it grow and develop.
Yeah, you are. You are part of that.
That's fun.
And then you talked about the amplification, because the acoustic instruments, each of them have different volumes. So to get them both heard and balanced, have a balanced volume, the amplification plays a big role in it. And also you mentioned Tian Jinqin in your documentary. And he also said that with amplification, with a bigger volume from the instrument, the nuances of the playing gestures can be heard as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I want to ask you this question.
Sure.
Yeah. So, have you heard like more nuances of your playing gestures?
On stage, yes.
Okay.
At home, no.
Okay.
I think you're right. I think it is a matter of volume. I think that when I'm playing at home, I'm focusing so much on tone, because I'm not an experienced electric guitarist. So when it comes to just getting an EQ that sounds good, getting compression, getting a tone that sounds good, that's kind of what I'm focusing on. And a lot of my music is ambient, so it's a lot of sustained notes.
Yeah.
So to be honest, when it comes to like the nuances, I think of like the strum, the attack of each note. But to be honest, most of the time I'm focusing on the sustain. I'm focusing on how long the note lasts and how it reacts to delay and reverb.
Okay.
So those are the nuances that I'm focusing on at home.
Okay.
But on stage, all of a sudden, it's the opposite. Every attack, every bend, every little note, it's a little more pronounced.
Okay.
Let's just do a quick sound. 你听一下。
Yeah, especially with the distortion, all the noises, little gestures, little movement you did on the instrument can be heard loud and clear.
Yes.
So how did you adjust your playing gestures to fit that?
To be honest, it feels quite different than playing the guzheng. I think a normal guzheng player would be a little bit more adept and be able to figure it out. But to me, the strings are different. They're not wound. So it feels a little bit more like playing an electric guitar. So I think it is just, for me, it's just a little less fingers on the strings. It's it's being a little more gentle, more conscious playing in a way, because when you play a long sustain like that, on a normal guzheng, maybe I would pull my hand away.
Yeah.
But on this one, because the sustain is longer, I have to concentrate on more detail. I tend to play less. On a normal guzheng, I can play a lot of notes.
At least, yeah.
But because the sustain is longer, it becomes muddy.
Right.
It becomes busier on this one. So I have to be a little more careful and play less.
Yeah, so that's how a change on the instrument actually affects how you play and the music you play.
Absolutely. Because the acoustic guzheng, the notes will sympathize with each other more effectively. The dynamic range is much, much bigger. So playing bass and high together is, a little more sympathetic and a little more, which sounds clearer.
Yeah.
With this one, less is more.
Okay.
And with an instrument like this, because the dynamic range is a little narrower, you can't play quite as many notes at the same time. So if you wanted to do that guzheng thing where you play many different things at once, you're going to find it becomes audio mud very, very quickly.
Okay.
And going back to kind of the subjective difference between an acoustic and electric instrument, I think that this is one of the things stopping a lot of guzheng players from trying something like this. And this is why this hasn't been invented yet, because guzheng is meant to be a solo instrument, and it's meant to fill the whole range of your sound, which means lots and lots and lots of playing.
Beat the notes, yeah.
There are no traditional guzheng arrangements which are minimal, right?
It's a lot of space.
A lot of space. Now, it sounds really, really nice through an instrument like this, but when people learn the guzheng, they're learning songs that are written for the guzheng, and no songs have been written for this yet.
Yeah.
So it's going to take a new generation of composers who work with an instrument like this.
Exactly.
So you can't always adapt. Acoustic guitar songs don't always work on the electric guitar. Sometimes they do, but they have to be adapted.
Right.
Yeah. So it's really fascinating to see what works and what doesn't, and every day I'm learning more. So
before you met this one, have you tried to pick up the sound from the acoustic one?
Yes. So as soon as I got to China, the first thing I wanted to do was put a guzheng through effect pedals. Not when I first started learning, but when I came back to China to move here, and I bought a guzheng. I bought a microphone, like a tiny. I tried a few. First of all, I tried the contact microphone.
Yeah.
Because using an internal microphone in effects, again, the tone isn't right. It doesn't really work. So I thought using a contact microphone would be better, and it was okay, but the sound is really kind of hollow, not very good.
Yeah.
I even bought a nice one, like an Oyster, like a really high quality German pickup microphone.
Yeah.
Better, but still not what I was looking for. For several years, I used a cheap 150 kwai little microphone on the inside, and that did what I needed it to do. I would tape the holes on the bottom of the guzheng so that it wouldn't feedback, and I could do things like reverb and delay, but I could only be so loud before it eventually picked up. And every single show I played, I had some kind of like feedback thing. So actually, at some point, I had a volume dan kwai, just so I could always pull back the volume if I. Last year, I bought a very nice microphone. This is a DPA, 4099G, which is like the microphone for instruments. So, I've tried. I've definitely tried a few different microphones. I can't say I've tried them all, but this is still my go-to for acoustic instruments, for guitar and for Guzheng. This is the thing that really allowed me to start to play that and have fun.
Yeah. Because with magnetic pickup, you need to reinvent the instrument.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
It has to be done by the pros. Yeah.
Absolutely.
The Luciers. Yeah. This is another line of electrification of acoustic instrument, which is to modify the instrument with electronic circuit. Have you seen the Meng Qi Pai built for Brad?
Yes, yeah, I saw that. That was quite cool.
Yes, I've attached a noise circuit, which is like a clone of the crackle box.
Yes.
Yeah. And I attach it for different strings.
Mm-hmm.
So while he was playing with the pipa, he actually also playing with the noise circuit.
Yes, I've seen some rigs like that, and I think it would be so interesting to have different circuits going out of each string, so you could even do MIDI, right, or any kind of connection.
Yeah. So something that picks up your gestures.
Yeah, from each individual note.
And you use the data of your gestures to control. You can control effectors if you want. You play this string, this will be a setup, a preset. Play this string, another preset will bring a new whole dimension to your expressions.
Absolutely. You could even have like what are they called? The little radio thing. So depending on how far away you are from it, or some kind of theremin.
I think one thing you can do, and without modify your instrument, without harm it, is that you can put like distance sensor.
Yeah, there's so much you could do with it.
Okay, let me know if you have some question, because we know Yukes is also doing a lot of DIY stuff.
I'm starting.
He's certainly capable of doing that very soon. So
give me a couple years. I might need a degree in this. We'll see how it goes.
I'll give you another week.
Christ, I gotta go.
Okay. So, all right. The third reason we electrify an acoustic instrument is to expand musical interface.
Yes.
That's maybe a little harder to understand, but if I show you this is like a...
Oh, what is this now?
This is an electric...
Rob Cool.
Yeah, it's a brand from China.
Neat.
And they gave me this.
It's like the Yui. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like the EV. It's a electric...
Cool.
How do I say? Wind instrument.
Of course. Is it MIDI? Is it?
Yeah, it's MIDI, but through this USB-C jack, and it has internal sound engine.
Oh, so it does have internal sound. Okay.
Yeah, that's internal sound. Of course.
Cool.
It's meant to be.
Well, one of them doesn't. One of those doesn't have the internal sounds. I think one of the cheaper UEs is like there's no internal
MIDI
sound,
controller.
only MIDI. Yeah.
This is marketed to the older people, because in China we have a tradition of playing wind instruments among the former generation.
Right. So, and that's the thing. This is what I covered in my documentaries. That's why they made the Dianziqi. It wasn't for sound quality. It wasn't for sonic exploration or anything fancy. It was to play folk songs as loudly as you could in a public place. You wanted to have an instrument that was as loud as the dizi, which is right next to your ear. So that's what that Dianziqi was built for.
Oh.
There's just something so interesting in China about this market of electronic instruments specifically for the older generation of folk music enthusiasts. There's all sorts of cheap little... I saw like a roll-out drum pad, which only has the Chinese percussion sounds. Like dong, 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 like all the Beijing percussion, but it's just like a little slap. That wouldn't exist in any other country except for China.
You know what is interesting? The robocall, the company name, actually says Luobo Keji, and Luobo is two types of the Chinese percussion.
Oh, that's so funny. Oh, Luobo, 我知道 the bell.
Luo bang bang tiang tiang tiang. Yes, Luo and Bo. Yeah. That's the name of the company. So
very cool.
And this is what we call the expansion of the musical interface, because on this one is actually not using any of the acoustic spec of the instrument. It only picks up your gesture and use the MIDI.
Right. But it's got the breath control, right?
Yeah. So actually, it's very direct. You just blow it, and the harder you blow, it will be...
Yeah, it's like a one-dimensional kind of...
And it's very sensitive. And because we brace every day, we control that, right?
Can I try this?
Yeah, of course. I can connect it up for you.
It doesn't have a speaker on the inside, does it?
Nope.
Good.
I have to turn on the monitor for you, or you won't be hearing it.
Right, good point. Alright, now we just have a little fun with it.
You can change. There's a lot of different tones. Let me show you. All right, so try this one.
All right.
Right, you just.
This is great. Guzheng. Oh no way.
Yeah. You can just tilt it up and down. I think they have the sensor like tilt sensor or something.
It's a wind Guzheng. That's hilarious. Yeah. Try something else.
It's so dense, this reverb.
Oh yeah, too dense. Okay, let's move on. Okay, I
you can play it later. So then we come to the third section, which is
moving fast.
Yeah, combination. The combination in music of acoustic instrument synthesizer, right? That's quite a topic, right?
Yes.
Because sometimes you have that feeling that you have to be experienced to make them fitting each other.
To some extent, but I think it's getting a little bit easier and easier. I think it just requires a basic knowledge of your instrument and improvisation.
Yep.
And a basic understanding of how the accompanying instrument works. So, you don't have to be a master of synthesizers to know, if you can play just a simple C major chord.
Yep.
And just sustain and play your instrument along with it, then you're already halfway there. So, what I do in my videos is I always try to combine a synthesizer tone, whether it's, a hardware synthesizer or some virtual, sound from whatever library.
Yeah.
I'll usually program some kind of basic melody or some kind of loop, and then once that is playing, I'll play along on the Guzheng.
Yep.
And as long as the synthesizer doesn't sound like a string instrument, then they work well together. So, yeah, I think it's a pretty simple concept. It's just a matter of accompaniment.
You use synthesizer mostly as accompaniment because you use a lot of sequencers.
Yeah, it's all about using an accompanying electronic tone as a background for performance. So, when I'm on stage live, people are more interested in seeing this instrument than me playing a synthesizer.
Of course, yeah.
If I'll play a lead solo on a synth every song, but it's usually the song people want to hear what the instrument can do. So for my videos and for my performance, I'll usually program a song. Again, sometimes it's just a single chord sustained with some modulation. Sometimes it's a sequencer, bum 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 bum. Sometimes it's just a recorded loop. It's just something simple, but I'll just take the synthesizer, let it go, and then I'll play on top of it.
Okay, so because with we were playing an acoustic instrument, audience can feel more connection with the instrument.
That's really it.
Because you're actually, they can see the instrument vibrating. Actually,
there are definitely some synthesizers that are a bit easier for the audience to connect with. First of all, if you're playing keys,
they can
see, right? But then there's there's some that are more based on bodily movement. Like the first one that comes to mind is the lyra from Soma. That's the one that's all about the pulsing. So I think that's one where you can kind of really connect with the artist more. All the landscape FM ones, which are all about the
very
human.
Physical, yeah.
I think the more physical the instrument, the more easy it is for an audience to connects with you performing it.
Right.
When you're playing Guzheng, easy, right? Or playing flute, easy. It's like you're directly connecting with the audience sonically, emotionally, in a way. Patching, it's more of like a fascination thing. It's hard to like patch something and have the audience...
Yeah, because there's no direct relationship between the way you're patching and the change of sound.
Exactly.
There's a much more complex routine in the middle.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
most of the time my music is very atmospheric, very mellow, sometimes even without the drum. So I like the synthesizer to really flatten out and take the lower half of like the audio spectrum. And because this Guzheng in particular isn't very bassy, even an acoustic Guzheng isn't like a bass guitar. So I tend to have the synth take up most of the frequency and then let the Guzheng or the flutes sit on top of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to make it sounds fuller, richer, right?
Yeah, that's, again, I'm not that experienced when it comes to mixing and when it comes to bringing a sound together. I have a long way to go, but I'm finding that it is all of these acoustic and even electric instruments, their range is narrow. They fill one job, you know? It's not like a piano where you can do everything. So these synthesizers and drum beats and everything help to fill out the rest of the space.
Yeah. So and with the electronic Guzheng, you actually it's easier for you to mix, master or before live performance. It's easier to soundtrack, right?
Absolutely. So it's like you know, using a series of pedals and using a bit of like mixing before a set. It is very clear to know what sound your Guzheng is going to sound like. And if you're in the middle of playing, you find your high frequency is too much, just turn down the knob, right?
Cool. So that's about it. So at the end, we will ask Yuke about his plan of his music creation, the future content creating.
Well, I'm pretty excited to announce that I just started to collaboration with Arturia.
Okay.
So I'm going to start to use some of their instruments and their synthesizers, so that should be pretty fun.
Yep.
There's a couple other brands I've been working with, just trying different synthesizers and trying to introduce like entry-level synthesizers to the Guzheng community and to the traditional instrument community. So the future of my content is I'm going to continue to develop introductory content, introducing my audience, which is primarily traditional instrument players, to the basics of performing with synthesizers. Now, I'm just trying to open people's mind to the idea of improvising a bit more, to accompanying themselves with some kind of electronic tool, and just seeing where it goes. I'm also working on trying to develop my tone and perform more. I've got more and more music coming out. I've got an EP coming out next month, which should be super fun. It's a mix of electric Guzheng, a lot of Xiao and Hulusi, kind of like a micro house, kind of groovy. Should be fun.
Yeah, cool.
A little bit of singing. It should be fun. So, you know, it's just a growth. It's a there's so many different things I'm interested in trying. So just a little bit every day.
So how do we find you on internet?
So I go by the same name on pretty much every platform. It's Yukes, Yuke. Everything goes up on Xiaohongshu. That's my main platform these days.
Okay.
The longer content's up on Bilibili. I'm also on Instagram, YouTube, and all that. Yeah. And I've got a fan group. And just, you know, more and more I'm trying to reach out and just see where I ought to end up being.
Yeah, so right now you can see the contacts on the screen.
Oh,
as we put it. No. So cool, that's about it. So thanks for Yuke to come to my place, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Of course, this was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for listening. I hope to see you over on Xiaohongshu for some fun anyway vibes. Hello, Mr. Bird. I love your birds. Are you gonna eat me?
Cool.
Okay.
So 这里是合成少数派，一个致力分享一切关于人体冷热知识和趣闻的少数派圈子。我是梦琪，他是玉克，感谢收看，我们下期再见。
谢谢大家。
谢谢大家。
Oh, someone had to be on camera, huh?
Yeah.